Siblings take shelter in abandoned desert house, but what they find inside is unbelievable. Nathan held his sister's hand tightly as they ran desperately under the scorching sun. The sandstorm was approaching rapidly behind them, swallowing everything in its path, and their bare feet burned in the hot sand that seemed to have no end. It was when they spotted the small wooden structure on the horizon that Nathan felt a mix of relief and despair. The house looked abandoned for years, but it was the only visible shelter for miles in the desert that surrounded them. "Emma, we made it!" he shouted over the growing noise of the wind. "There's a house up ahead." The 9-year-old girl stumbled, but her brother caught her immediately. Her blonde hair was plastered to her sweaty face, and the beige dress she wore was covered in dust. Nathan, at 12, seemed older than he was, carrying the weight of responsibility for protecting his sister since they became orphans. "I can't run anymore, Nathan," whispered Emma through tears. "Just a little further, little one, we're almost there." The two siblings had walked for 3 straight days through the interior of Arizona, fleeing the orphanage where they had been mistreated for months. They had only the clothes on their backs and the hope of finding distant relatives who might not even know of their existence. What they didn't expect was to get lost in the middle of the desert that stretched across the arid northern region of the state. When they finally reached the time-worn wooden door, Nathan pounded on it, panting. The wind howled louder and louder, and dense clouds of sand began to envelop them. "Is anyone there? Please!" he shouted, knocking again. To his surprise, slow footsteps approached from the other side of the door. An elderly, trembling woman's voice answered, "Who's there?" "We're 2 children. We need shelter from the storm," Emma managed to shout, even with her weak voice. The door opened slowly, revealing an elderly woman with white hair tied in a loose bun. Her brown eyes looked tired but kind, and she wore a simple, faded blue cotton dress. When her eyes landed on the children, she took a step back, bringing her hand to her chest in shock. "Good heavens," as she murmured, and her legs seemed to buckle. You are..." Nathan looked at the woman with confusion. How could she know them? He had never seen her before in his life. "Are you all right, ma'am?" he asked, pulling Emma closer to him. The elderly woman took a deep breath, trying to compose herself, but her hands were visibly trembling. "Nathan and Emma," she said, as if seeing ghosts. "You are Nathan and Emma Mitchell." The siblings looked at each other, frightened. How did this stranger know their names? "How do you know who we are?" Emma asked in a small voice. "Come in, quickly," said the woman, looking nervously at the approaching storm. "It's not safe for you to stay out there. I'll explain everything later." Nathan hesitated for a moment, but the terrifying noise of the wind and the increasing density of sand in the air made him take Emma's hand and enter the house. The woman quickly closed the door behind them and locked it with a heavy wooden bolt. The inside of the house was simple but clean. Old dark wooden furniture was scattered around the small living room, and the smell of herbal tea hung in the air. A stone fireplace occupied one wall, and several yellowed photographs were spread out on a table near the window. "Sit down," said the woman, pointing to a worn-out sofa. "I'll get some water and something for you to eat. You must be exhausted." "Wait," Nathan interrupted her, still suspicious. "First you need to explain how you know our names. We've never seen you before." The elderly woman stopped in the middle of the room and turned to face them. Tears began to form in her eyes, and she seemed to be fighting against very deep emotions. "My name is Dorothy Mitchell," she said, her voice choked, "and I have known you since you were born." "Mitchell," Emma repeated, confused. "That's our last name." "Because we are family, my dear," Dorothy whispered. "I am your paternal grandparent's sister." The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of the storm, now hitting the house with full force. Nathan felt as if the world had stopped around him. Family. They had family. But we were told we had no living relatives," Nathan managed to say, his voice coming out hoarser than he intended. "There is much you do not know," Dorothy said, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "And there is much I need to tell you. But first, let me take care of you. You are too thin and need looking after." She headed toward what appeared to be a small kitchen, leaving the siblings alone in the living room. Nathan looked around, trying to process everything that was happening. The photographs on the table caught his attention, and he moved closer to see them better. "Emma, come look at this," he whispered. The photos showed a happy family posing in front of the very house they were in now, but the images seemed decades old. Nathan instantly recognized two familiar faces in one of the photographs, his parents. "Mum and Dad," Emma whispered, touching the photograph with trembling fingers. "They are in this picture." "How is this possible?" Nathan murmured to himself. Dorothy returned carrying a tray with homemade bread, cheese, and 2 glasses of water. When she saw the children looking at the photographs, she sighed heavily. "I figured you would find those photos," she said, placing the tray on a low table. "That picture was taken 15 years ago when your parents came here for the last time." "Last time?" Nathan turned to her. "They knew this place?" "Knew it?" Dorothy repeated sadly. "My dear, this was your family's home. Your grandparents, my siblings, built this house over 40 years ago. Your parents grew up coming here every summer." Emma approached her great-aunt with eyes full of tears. "Why did no one ever tell us about this? Why were we left in an orphanage if we had family?" Dorothy knelt in front of the girl and held her small hands. "Because there are very bad people who did not want you to know the truth," she said, her voice heavy with pain. "People who did terrible things to keep you away from here." "What people?" Nathan asked, feeling a chill in his stomach. "Your Uncle Stephen," Dorothy answered, and the name came out of her mouth as if it had a bitter taste. "Your father's twin brother." Nathan felt his legs weaken. They had an uncle, and he was their father's twin. "But our father didn't have any brothers," Emma said, confused. "At least, that's what we were told." "You were told many lies, my dear," Dorothy sighed, standing up and walking to an old dresser. "Stephen did everything he could to make sure you never discovered this family, your origins, about everything." She opened a drawer and took out a yellowed envelope, sealed with red wax. "Your parents left this with me before they left," she said, holding the envelope with reverence, "with specific instructions to deliver it only if you appeared here." Nathan took the envelope with trembling hands. The seal was intact, and on the paper was written in cursive script, "To Nathan and Emma, our beloved children." "May I open it?" he asked, looking at Dorothy. "It is rightfully yours," she replied, "but prepare yourselves. The truth is not always easy to accept." Carefully, Nathan broke the seal and withdrew several folded sheets of paper. The handwriting was clearly from their mother, Sarah Mitchell, and began with words that would make their hearts race. "My beloved children, if you are reading this letter, it means you have managed to reach the family home and that Dorothy has kept her promise to look after you. There is so much we need to explain, so much we wish we could have told you in person." Nathan stopped reading aloud when he saw tears streaming down his sister's face. "Keep going," whispered Emma. "I need to know. First, know that we never, not for a second, wanted to abandon you. Every day away from you was torture for us. We were forced to leave to protect you because we discovered something terrible about the family that put us all in danger." Dorothy sat down heavily in an armchair, as if the next words would destroy her. "You are the legitimate heirs to a great fortune that has belonged to the Mitchell family for generations. These desert lands, which may seem worthless, hide one of the largest deposits of precious stones ever discovered in the United States. Your great-grandparents discovered it decades ago, but kept it secret to protect the family." Nathan stopped reading, incredulous. They were rich. They had an inheritance. "Is this true?" he asked Dorothy. "Every word," she confirmed, nodding gravely. "But keep reading. The story gets more complicated. When your grandparents died, the inheritance should have been divided equally between your father David and your uncle Stephen. But Stephen found out about the precious stones before we did, and began making secret deals with mining companies. He didn't want to share anything." Emma moved closer to her brother to read along. "Stephen forged documents to make it look like your father had renounced the inheritance. When we discovered what he was doing, we tried to fight it legally, but Stephen used his physical resemblance to David to confuse authorities and create even more false documents." "Twins," Nathan murmured. "That's how he managed to fool everyone." "The situation became dangerous when Stephen began threatening us directly. He said if we didn't disappear and let him keep everything, something terrible would happen to you. As parents, we had no choice but to protect you." Dorothy stood up and walked to the window, watching the storm that still raged outside. "Your parents were right to be afraid," she said. "Stephen is not a stable person. He is driven by jealousy and greed, and is capable of anything to get what he wants. We had to fake our own deaths in a car accident. It was the only way to make Stephen believe you were safe and truly orphaned. We thought he would leave you alone, but we discovered too late that he placed you in an orphanage to make sure you would never find out about your true identity." Nathan felt anger rising in his chest. Everything they had suffered in the orphanage, all the loneliness and fear, had been because of an uncle they didn't even know existed. Dorothy kept documents that prove all of this. She risked her own life to preserve evidence of Stephen's fraud. There are maps hidden in this house that show exactly where the precious stones are. There are copies of the original documents that prove you are the true heirs. "Where are these documents?" Emma asked Dorothy. "In a safe place," she replied. "But there is something the letter doesn't mention, something I discovered after your parents left." "What?" Nathan asked, feeling a chill. "Your parents didn't die in that staged accident," Dorothy said, her words coming out as a whisper. "They are still alive." The silence that followed was deafening. Nathan felt as if he had been punched in the stomach, and Emma let out a sob that came from the depths of her soul. "Alive?" Nathan managed to whisper. "Stephen found out the accident had been faked," Dorothy explained, tears in her eyes. "He found them and he's keeping them prisoners somewhere. 2 years ago he came here to threaten me, saying that if I told anyone anything, his parents would pay the price." Emma collapsed on the sofa, sobbing uncontrollably. Nathan felt torn between the most intense anger he had ever felt in his life and a painful hope he didn't know if he could trust. "Where is he keeping them?" he asked, his fists clenched. "I don't know," Dorothy admitted. "But there's a chance we can find out. Stephen doesn't know I kept a copy of all his communications with mining companies. In those communications, there are mentions of properties he secretly bought. If we can examine those documents—" "Then let's examine them," Nathan interrupted, determined. "Now." "It's not that simple," Dorothy said, shaking her head. "The documents are hidden in a specific location, and to get to them, you would have to prove you are really who you say you are." "How?" Emma asked, drying her tears. "Your parents hid more than documents here in this house," Dorothy revealed. "They left clues, a sort of treasure hunt that only you two could solve. The clues lead to information about where Stephen might be keeping your parents." Nathan stood up, feeling a fierce determination taking over him. "Then let's get started," he said. "We've already wasted too much time." "Wait," Dorothy interrupted them. "There's something else you need to know before you begin. Stephen isn't working alone." "What do you mean?" Emma asked. "He has a partner, someone with a lot of power and influence, someone who made it possible to keep your parents hidden for so long without raising suspicions," Dorothy explained. "And that someone has the resources to find you if he discovers you're here." "Who is it?" Nathan insisted. "A man named Richard Anderson. He owns several mining companies in the region and has important political connections. He was the one who provided the resources for Stephen to forge documents and keep your parents captive." The storm outside seemed to be letting up, but inside the house, a new storm was just beginning. Nathan looked at his sister and saw the same determination in her eyes that he felt in himself. "I don't care who's involved," he said. "We're going to find our parents. And we're going to make Stephen pay for everything he's done," Emma added, surprising everyone with the firmness in her voice. Dorothy looked at them for a long moment, seeing in them the same traits of courage and determination she had known in their parents. "Then let's begin," she said finally. "But first, you need to eat and rest. What you're about to face won't be easy, and you'll need all the energy you can gather." As they ate the homemade bread and cheese Dorothy had prepared, the siblings could barely contain their anxiety. Every minute that passed felt like an eternity when they knew their parents were somewhere, probably suffering, waiting for a rescue they might not even know was coming. "Dorothy," Nathan said when he finished eating, "why didn't you try to find us before? Why did you wait until now to tell us the truth? The elderly woman sighed deeply before answering. Because Stephen told me that if I made any move to find you, he would kill your parents immediately, she said, her voice trembling. For years, I lived in fear of making a wrong move, but when you showed up here on your own, I felt it was a sign. It was time to fight. How do we start looking for the clues? Emma asked. Your parents were very clever. Dorothy smiled for the first time since the children had arrived. They knew that if something happened, you two would have to work together to solve the puzzles. The first clue is in this very room. Nathan and Emma immediately stood up and began examining every corner of the room. There were so many old things there, so many objects that could hide secrets. It must be something personal, Nathan reasoned aloud, something only we would recognize. Emma approached the photographs on the table again and examined them one by one. In one of them, there was an image of their parents when they were very young, holding something in their hands. Nathan, come look at this, she called. What are they holding in this photo? Nathan approached and examined the image. It was hard to see clearly, but it seemed to be some kind of locket or pendant. It looks like a piece of jewelry, he said. It's not just any piece of jewelry, Dorothy approached them. It's a Mitchell family pendant that has been passed down from generation to generation. Your mother always wore it. Where is it now? Emma asked. It's here in the house somewhere, Dorothy replied, and finding that pendant is the first clue. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. The siblings began a systematic search of the house. Nathan examined the bookshelves, looking for any book that seemed different or that could hide something. Emma explored the furniture, running her hands under tables and inside drawers. Dorothy watched them in silence, remembering when their parents were young and did exactly the same things, always curious and determined. I found something, Emma suddenly shouted. She was crouched beside an old armchair and had discovered a small opening in the upholstery that seemed to have been made on purpose. Inside the opening was a small object wrapped in a soft cloth. Nathan joined her as Emma carefully unwrapped the cloth. Inside was a golden pendant, exactly like the one in the photograph, but there was something engraved on the back that wasn't visible in the image. Where the waters meet the dry land, look for the stone that holds memories. Nathan read the engraving aloud. It's a riddle, Emma said, excited. Where the waters meet the dry land. It must be about the well, Dorothy said suddenly. There's an old well in the backyard near the vegetable garden. During the rainy season, the water overflows and creates a small temporary pond. The three of them left the house through the back door. The storm had completely passed, leaving the air clean and the sky golden in the late afternoon. The stone well was exactly where Dorothy had indicated, surrounded by larger stones that formed an irregular circle. Stone that holds memories, Nathan repeated, looking around. It must be one of these stones around the well. They examined each stone, looking for any special sign or mark. It was Emma who noticed that one of the stones had a slightly different shape than the others, as if it had been carved or modified. This one looks different, she said, pointing to a medium-sized stone that had small carvings on its surface. Nathan crouched down to examine the carvings more closely. They weren't natural marks, but rather symbols engraved by hand. It seemed to be a date. 1989. 1989, he said. Does that mean anything to you, Dorothy? It was the year your parents got married, she replied, moved. And also the year they discovered the first deposit of precious stones on this property. Nathan tried to move the stone and found it was loose. When he lifted it, it revealed a small compartment dug into the ground, inside which was a sealed metal tube. Another clue, Emma said eagerly. Nathan carefully opened the tube and pulled out a rolled-up paper. This time the message was longer and more detailed. My dear children, if you have come this far, you are on the right path. The next clue will lead you to the main hideout, where all the documents proving the truth about our family are kept. But be careful. This place might also be under surveillance. Under surveillance, Emma repeated, worried. Look for the tree that doesn't belong to the dry land. It was planted to mark the spot where the secret is buried. Count 7 steps north from its roots and dig deep. But only do this when you're sure you're alone. Nathan continued reading. Dorothy looked around nervously. A tree that doesn't belong to the dry land, she murmured. It must be the mango tree. Mango tree? Nathan asked. There's a mango tree in the back of the property, Dorothy explained. Your grandparents planted it many years ago, even though they knew it wasn't native to this arid region. They had to constantly irrigate it to keep it alive. Then let's go, Emma said, determined. Wait, Dorothy held them back. The message says to make sure you're alone. What if someone is watching us? As if her words had materialized the danger, the sound of a car engine approaching echoed across the property. Everyone froze, looking toward the dirt road leading to the house. Hide this, Nathan whispered, quickly putting the paper back in the tube. They ran back inside the house, and Dorothy locked the back door with trembling hands. Through the front window, they could see a black pickup truck approaching, kicking up a cloud of dust. Who could that be? Emma asked, grabbing her brother's hand. I hope it's just someone lost, Dorothy murmured, but her voice didn't sound convinced. The vehicle stopped in front of the house, and a tall man with dark hair and sunglasses stepped out of the driver's side. Even from a distance, there was something threatening about his posture. Stephen, Dorothy whispered, turning pale. It's him. Nathan felt his blood run cold. The man who had destroyed his family was there, just a few meters away. What do we do? Emma asked in panic. Stay calm, Dorothy said, trying to control her own voice. He can't know you're here. Heavy footsteps approached the front door, followed by loud knocks on the wood. Dorothy, a man's voice shouted. Open this door. I know you're in there. Hide, Dorothy whispered to the children. Quick, go to the back room and don't make a sound. Nathan and Emma ran silently to the small room at the back of the house and hid behind the bed. They could clearly hear the voices coming from the living room. Stephen, Dorothy's voice sounded as she opened the door. What an unpleasant surprise. Don't pretend you weren't expecting me, he said sarcastically. I know you've been asking questions about me in town. Did you think I wouldn't find out? I don't know what you're talking about, Dorothy replied, but her voice trembled slightly. Don't lie to me, old woman. Stephen's voice grew more threatening. And above all, don't think you can fool me. 2 days ago, a shopkeeper in town told me you asked about children moving through the area. Nathan and Emma exchanged glances, frightened. How could Stephen have found out so quickly? I have a right to be concerned about lost children, Dorothy replied more firmly. It's not a crime. Ah, but it is a crime to hide information about the true heirs of the Mitchell property, Stephen countered. And if you're looking for 2 specific children, then you're trying to interfere in matters that are none of your business. This property is mine too, Dorothy said. I have as much right to be here as you do. Had, Stephen corrected. Before I needed your cooperation to keep up appearances, but things have changed. My partners are no longer willing to tolerate possible information leaks. Your partners? Dorothy asked, though she already knew the answer. Richard is getting impatient, Stephen continued. He wants to finalize the land purchase soon, and for that to happen, there can't be any complications related to heirs that supposedly don't exist. Nathan felt anger boiling in his chest. They were talking about him and Emma as if they were just obstacles to be removed. If you're hiding anything from me, Dorothy, you'll regret it, Stephen threatened. And if those 2 kids really showed up here, you'll hand them over to me right now. I don't know what kids you're talking about, Dorothy insisted. The sound of heavy footsteps echoed through the house, indicating Stephen was walking around the living room, probably looking for signs of the siblings' presence. What's this? He asked suddenly. Nathan heard the sound of plates being moved and realized Stephen had found the tray with leftover food that Dorothy had served them. 3 glasses, Dorothy. Stephen's voice became dangerously low. Since when do you have visitors? Dorothy hesitated. I broke one of the glasses and had to get another. Don't lie to me, Stephen shouted, and there was the sound of something breaking. Where are they? There's no one here but me, Dorothy said firmly, despite the obvious fear in her voice. Stephen began walking through the house, opening doors and examining rooms. Nathan held Emma's hand and silently indicated they should move under the bed. They hid completely seconds before hearing footsteps approaching the bedroom. The door swung open forcefully, and they could see Stephen's feet standing at the bedroom entrance. "I know you're here," he said loudly. "You can come out now, or I can make things much harder for everyone." Nathan and Emma held their breath, trying not to make the slightest noise. Stephen entered the room and they could see him walking around, checking behind furniture and inside the closet. For several agonizing minutes, he continued searching, coming dangerously close to the bed where they were hidden. At one point, Nathan saw Stephen's knees bending, as if he were going to look under the bed. "Stephen!" Dorothy's voice came from the living room. "Get out of my house right now, or I'll call the police." "With what phone?" He laughed sarcastically. "There's no cell signal here, and you haven't had a landline for years." But the interruption was enough to distract him. Stephen stood up and left the room, returning to the living room. "Listen carefully, old woman," he said, his voice now laden with a chilling threat. "If I find out you lied to me today, the consequences will be terrible, and not just for you." "What do you mean?" Dorothy asked. "David and Sarah are alive, as you well know," Stephen revealed casually, as if commenting on the weather. "And as long as I need them alive to maintain control of the situation, your cooperation is essential." Nathan had to cover Emma's mouth to stop her from screaming. Hearing the confirmation that their parents were alive was both the best and worst news they could receive. "If you're doing anything that could put my plans at risk," Stephen continued, "I might decide I don't need them anymore, understood?" "Understood," Dorothy whispered. "Great. I'll be back here next week to make sure everything remains normal," Stephen said. "And Dorothy, the next time I come here, I expect to find you alone. Because if there's any sign you've had visitors, especially certain children, our conversation will be very different." The sound of the door slamming shut echoed through the house, followed by footsteps fading away and the pickup truck's engine starting. Only when the sound of the vehicle had completely faded into the distance did Nathan and Emma come out from under the bed. Dorothy was in the living room, seated in the armchair, with her face in her hands, clearly shaken by the encounter. "Dorothy?" Emma ran to her and hugged her. "Are you okay?" "I am," she replied, but her hands were still trembling. "But now we have even more reasons to act quickly." "He confirmed that our parents are alive," Nathan said, trying to mix relief with determination. "That means we have a real chance to save them." "But it also means we're racing against time," Dorothy warned. "If Stephen suspects you're here, he might decide to get rid of your parents to eliminate any complications." "Then let's find those documents now," Emma said with determination. "We can't wait any longer." "I agree," Nathan nodded. "But we have to be careful. He said he'll be back next week. That gives us a few days, but not much time." "First, let's wait for it to get completely dark," Dorothy suggested. "If he left anyone watching the property, it will be harder for them to see us in the dark." The next hours passed slowly. Dorothy prepared a simple meal while they planned their next steps. She also shared more details about the property and the secrets she had kept for years. "Your grandparents discovered the first emerald deposit by chance," she explained. "They were digging a new well when they found the first stones. They immediately realized the discovery could change their lives, but they also knew it could attract dangerous people. That's why they kept it secret," Nathan understood. "Exactly. They made secret maps of the entire region, identifying several spots where there were mineral deposits. But they never commercially exploited it, preferring to leave that for future generations to decide." "And Stephen found out about this?" Emma asked. "Stephen was always envious of his brother," Dorothy sighed. "When your grandparents died, he went through all their belongings looking for anything of value. That's how he found the first clues about the precious stones." "But he needed our father for legal access to the land," Nathan reasoned. "Yes, legally the inheritance should have been divided between the two brothers. Stephen tried to convince David to sell his share for a very low price, but your father suspected there was something more valuable involved. And he started investigating on his own," Emma added. "David discovered the truth about the precious stones and also found out that Stephen had already made secret deals with mining companies," Dorothy continued. "That's when the situation became dangerous." "Stephen couldn't let our father expose the illegal deals," Nathan understood. "And he also couldn't simply kill David, Because that would raise suspicions and could complicate the deals with the companies, Dorothy explained. His solution was to force your parents to disappear and pretend they were dead, while he used forged documents to take full control of the inheritance. When it finally grew dark, the three prepared to go out in search of the hidden documents. Dorothy found flashlights and digging tools, and they slipped out quietly through the back door. The hose was located about 200 meters from the main house, in an area that clearly received special irrigation. Even in the arid desert environment, the tree was lush and full of life. 7 steps to the north, Nathan murmured, consulting the message again. They carefully measured the steps from the tree trunk and marked the spot where they should dig. The soil was softer than they expected, as if someone had dug there recently. Someone has been here already, Dorothy observed, worried. Or our parents left the soil purposely easier to dig, Emma suggested optimistically. They began digging carefully, using flashlights to illuminate their work. After a few minutes, Nathan's shovel hit something solid. I found something, he whispered. It was a metal box, heavy and well sealed. When they brought it to the surface and opened it, they found something that made their hearts race. Dozens of documents, detailed maps, photographs, and even some gemstones in small bags. My God, Dorothy whispered, shining her light on the box's contents. It's all here. Among the documents were original property deeds, mining agreements signed by Stephen using false names, and even recordings on small electronic devices. Look at this. Emma pointed to a detailed map showing the entire region with specific markings. There are at least 12 different locations marked as gemstone deposits. And look at these agreements. Nathan was examining some contracts. Stephen promised companies exclusive access to all the deposits in exchange for huge upfront payments. Money he's already received and spent, Dorothy observed. If the truth comes out, he'll have to return it all and could even face criminal charges. So he really has no choice but to keep our parents captive. Emma understood the gravity of the situation. And if we go public with these documents, he might decide he can't risk keeping your parents alive, Nathan said, feeling the weight of responsibility. We have to be very smart about how we use this information, Dorothy warned. One wrong move and we could lose our only chance to save David and Sarah. They carefully gathered all the documents and returned to the house in silence. Once inside, they spread everything out on the living room table to examine in more detail. Is there anything here that could give us clues about where our parents are being held? Emma asked, flipping through the papers. Maybe. Nathan was studying a series of receipts and invoices. Look at these regular payments to a private security company. Anderson Private Security LLC, Dorothy read. That's Stephen's partner's company. And look at the dates, Emma pointed out. The payments started exactly when our parents disappeared. And the amounts are too high for just normal security, Nathan observed. It looks more like they're paying to keep someone in a specific location. There are addresses on these receipts, Dorothy noticed. 3 different properties that have been receiving special security services for years. Nathan picked up one of the maps and tried to locate the addresses mentioned on the receipts. 2 of the properties were relatively close, but the third was in a more isolated area, about a 5-hour drive away. This one seems the most likely, he said, pointing to the most distant location. It's isolated enough to hold people without anyone finding them, but not so far that it would be impractical for Stephen to visit regularly. How can we be sure? Emma asked. We can't, Dorothy admitted, but it's our best lead. The problem is, even if we find where your parents are, we don't know how to get them out without putting their lives in danger. We need help, Nathan said. Someone with legal authority who can use this evidence officially. But who can we trust? Emma asked. Stephen said he has important political connections. How do we know they won't alert him if we seek help? Dorothy was thoughtful for a moment. There is one person, she said finally, a public prosecutor who investigated Stephen a few years ago on suspicion of fraud. He could never prove anything, but he always suspected there was more to it. Do you think he would help us? Nathan asked. Doctor, Robert Thompson is one of the few people I can completely trust, Dorothy replied. He's tried several times to get evidence against Stephen, but he's never had enough material. Then let's go find him, Emma said. With all these documents, he should be able to take legal action. It's not that simple, Dorothy warned. Dr. Robert works in the capital, 2 days' travel from here. And even if we could reach him, it would take time for him to build a legal case. Time our parents may not have, Nathan added, frustrated. But there is something we can do in the meantime, Dorothy said, picking up some of the documents. We can use this information to pressure Stephen in a way he doesn't expect. How? The siblings asked almost simultaneously. Stephen believes you know nothing about the inheritance or what he's done. If he finds out you not only know everything but also have evidence, he might get desperate enough to make mistakes. Or he might decide to eliminate our parents immediately, Nathan pointed out. It's a risk, Dorothy admitted, but it might also be our only chance to force him to negotiate. What kind of negotiation? Emma asked. Stephen needs this evidence to remain hidden. If we offer to exchange the documents for your parents' freedom, he might accept, Dorothy explained. But if we hand over the documents, he'll be free to continue with his plans, Nathan protested. Not necessarily, Dorothy smiled for the first time in hours. Because we can make copies of everything and only hand over the originals. With the copies, we can still expose him after your parents are safe. It's risky, Emma said, but it might work. First, we need to be sure where our parents are, Nathan decided. And for that, we'll have to investigate that address. How? Dorothy asked. It's too dangerous for you to get close to that place. We won't get close, Nathan explained. We'll observe from a distance. If we can confirm that's where they're keeping our parents, then we can plan our strategy better. And how do we get there? Emma asked. It's a 5-hour drive. I have an old car in the garage, Dorothy said. I haven't used it in years, but it still runs. I can take you there. That's too dangerous for you, Nathan protested. If Stephen finds out... My dear, Dorothy interrupted, placing a hand on his shoulder. I've spent 10 years living in fear and keeping secrets. I won't let you face this alone. They spent the rest of the night planning the trip and organizing the documents. Dorothy made photographic copies of all the most important papers using an old camera, and they hid the originals in several safe places around the house. If something happens to us, she said, at least the evidence will be preserved. When the sun rose, they were ready to leave. Dorothy's car was an old sedan but well maintained. She had filled the gas tank and prepared water and food for the trip. Remember, she said as they left the property, we're just observing. We do nothing risky until we're sure what we're dealing with. The journey was long and tense. They followed dirt roads that wound through the arid countryside, passing small towns and isolated farms. Nathan and Emma tried to sleep for part of the trip, but anxiety kept them awake. Are you nervous? Dorothy asked when they stopped to refuel at an isolated gas station. Very, Emma admitted, but also anxious. If our parents are really at that place, we'll see them for the first time in years. Even if it's from a distance, Nathan added. When they finally neared the area indicated by the address, the tension in the car was palpable. The property was located at the end of a dirt road that seemed to go on forever, surrounded by rocky hills that provided complete isolation. Let's stop here, Dorothy said, parking the car behind a rock formation that would hide them from the property's view. They walked carefully for about a kilometer until they reached a high point from where they could observe the place with binoculars Dorothy had brought. The property was larger than they expected. There was a main house, 2 large sheds, and what appeared to be an area fenced with electric wire. Several vehicles were parked in the yard, including the black pickup truck they had seen the day before. Stephen is here, Nathan whispered, pointing to the pickup truck. And look at that, Emma pointed to what appeared to be armed guards patrolling the property. Dorothy adjusted the binoculars and watched for several minutes before passing them to Nathan. There's definitely something very important being protected there, she said. No one keeps this level of security for normal property. Nathan carefully examined each section of the property through the binoculars. It was while focusing on one of the main house's windows that he saw something that made his heart stop. Emma, he whispered, his voice almost failing. Look at the second-floor window, on the right side. Emma took the binoculars and focused where Nathan had indicated. For a moment, she saw nothing, but then a figure moved behind the window. It's Mom, she whispered. and tears began to stream down her face. "Are you sure?" Dorothy asked, taking the binoculars. "I'm absolutely sure," Emma cried. "It's her hair, the way she moves. It's our mother." Nathan felt a mix of joy, relief, and anger, like he had never experienced before. His parents were alive, they were there, just a few miles away, yet completely inaccessible. "Can you see Dad too?" he asked. They watched for a few more minutes but couldn't see any other figures in the windows. "Let's keep watching," Dorothy suggested. "Maybe we can see more people and better understand the situation." For almost 2 hours they remained observing the property. They saw guards changing shifts, vehicles arriving and leaving, and occasionally figures moving inside the house. At one point, they saw Stephen come out of the house and talk intensely with a man in a suit who seemed important. "That must be Richard Anderson," Dorothy whispered. It was when they were preparing to leave that something dramatic happened. One of the second-floor windows opened, and a female figure appeared clearly in the opening. It was Sarah Mitchell, Nathan and Emma's mother, and she was looking directly in their direction, as if she knew someone was watching. "Did she see us?" Emma asked anxiously. "I don't know," Nathan answered, but kept the binoculars focused on the window. Sarah remained at the window for a few minutes, and then did something that left everyone emotional. She raised her hand and waved, clearly in the direction where they were hidden. "She knows we're here," Nathan said, his voice choked with emotion. "But how is that possible?" Dorothy asked. "Maybe she's just been waiting for someone for so long that she developed the habit of looking at the mountains," Emma suggested. "Or maybe she has some way of knowing that you are alive and looking for them," Dorothy said thoughtfully. Suddenly the window closed quickly, and they saw guards approaching the main house. Something had happened. "Let's go," Dorothy said urgently. "Now." They ran back to the car and left quickly, but not before Nathan memorized every detail of the property he had managed to observe. During the trip back, they planned their next steps. "Now we know where they are," Nathan said, "but we also know it's very well guarded." "We need a very smart strategy," Emma agreed. "We can't just show up and try to take them." "And we also can't wait too long," Dorothy warned. "The more time we spend planning, the greater the chance Stephen will find out we're investigating." "I have an idea," Nathan said suddenly. "What if we use the documents themselves as bait?" "How so?" Emma asked. "We send a message to Stephen saying we have all the documents that prove his fraud, and we want to make a trade." "The documents for our parents' freedom," Nathan explained. "But he won't trust us," Dorothy pointed out. "And he'll want to verify if we really have the evidence." "Then we'll show him," Emma said, understanding her brother's plan. "We'll set a meeting in a public place and bring some of the evidence to prove we have everything." "It's dangerous," Dorothy said. "If he decides to just capture us too." "That's why we'll choose a place where he can't do that without drawing attention," Nathan elaborated. "And we'll have an escape plan in case things go wrong." "And if he accepts the trade?" Emma asked. "Will we really hand over the documents?" "We'll hand over the originals but keep the copies," Nathan answered. "After our parents are safe, we use the copies to expose him officially." "He won't accept that," Dorothy warned. "He'll want guarantees that we won't be a problem in the future." "Then we'll give those guarantees," Emma said, surprising them both. "We'll say we only want our family back and that we don't care about money or properties." "Would you really do that?" Dorothy asked. "Would you give up a fortune just to have your parents back?" "Without hesitation," Nathan answered immediately. "Our family is worth more than any money," Emma agreed. When they got back to the house in the desert, it was already getting dark again. They were exhausted from the trip and the emotional tension of seeing their parents after so many years. "Let's rest tonight and start planning better tomorrow," Dorothy suggested. But their plans were interrupted when they reached the property and saw that there were lights on in the house. "Someone's inside," Nathan whispered. "We left the lights off when we left," Emma confirmed. "It could be Stephen," Dorothy said, worried. "Maybe he suspected we weren't here." They carefully approached the house and peered through the windows. There were 2 figures in the living room, but it wasn't Stephen. They were 2 men they had never seen before, wearing dark clothes and seeming to be searching for something. "Who are they?" Emma whispered. "Probably Richard's men," Dorothy answered. "Stephen must have sent them to search the house." "Did they find anything?" Nathan asked. Through the window they could see the men had scattered various objects around the room, clearly looking for something specific. Fortunately, all the important evidence was hidden in places they were unlikely to find. "We have to wait for them to leave," Dorothy whispered. "What if they stay all night?" Emma asked. "Then we'll have to find another place to sleep," Nathan answered. They hid behind the garage and watched the house for over an hour. Finally, the two men came out, carrying some objects that looked like photographs and less important documents. "At least they didn't find the main evidence," Dorothy observed when they went back inside the house. "But now Stephen definitely knows someone has been here," Nathan said, looking at the mess the intruders had left. "And they'll be back," Emma added, "probably with more people and more time to search." "Then we have to act quickly," Dorothy concluded. "We can't wait any longer to contact Stephen." "How are we going to do that?" Nathan asked. "We don't have his phone number." "But I know where we can find him," Dorothy said. "There's a bar in town where he usually goes every Thursday to meet with his associates. It's a public place, but not very crowded." "Perfect," Emma said. "We can approach him there." "Today is Wednesday," Nathan observed. "That gives us a day to prepare." They spent the night reorganizing the house and planning every detail of the meeting. Dorothy knew the bar well and drew a map showing all the entrances, exits, and places where they could hide if necessary. "The important thing is not to look desperate," she advised. "Stephen needs to believe you are in control of the situation." "What if he brings guards?" Emma asked. "He might, but not many," Dorothy answered. "The bar is frequented by locals and too much security would draw attention." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. On Thursday afternoon, they headed into town. Dorothy had loaned older clothes for Nathan and Emma to disguise themselves, and she herself wore a hat and sunglasses to not be easily recognized. The bar was exactly as Dorothy had described, a small, simple establishment with a few scattered tables and a relaxed atmosphere. They arrived early and positioned themselves at a table in the back, from where they could see the entire entrance. "Are you nervous?" Dorothy asked. "Very," Nathan admitted, "but also eager to finally do something." "Remember," she said, "don't reveal everything at once. Let Stephen ask questions and answer just enough to keep him interested." At 8 o'clock in the evening, Stephen entered the bar accompanied by two men. One was clearly a bodyguard, but the other seemed to be someone important, probably Richard Anderson. "It's time," Nathan whispered. They waited for Stephen to settle at a table in the center of the bar and order his drinks. Then Nathan stood up and walked slowly toward his table. "Uncle Stephen," he said, stopping beside the table. Stephen looked up from his drink and nearly spilled it when he saw Nathan standing there. His expression instantly changed from relaxed to shocked, then to anger. "You," he said, rising quickly. "I need to talk to you," Nathan said calmly, though his heart was racing. The bodyguard moved as if to intervene, but Stephen stopped him with a gesture. "How did you find me here?" Stephen asked in a low voice. "I have my methods," Nathan replied, "and I have some things I believe will interest you." "What kind of things?" the man who seemed to be Richard asked. "Documents," Nathan said simply. "Documents that prove many interesting things about mining deals and forged inheritances." Stephen visibly paled. He looked around the bar, clearly calculating his options. "Where is your sister?" he asked. "In a safe place," Nathan lied, "along with all the documents." "What documents?" Stephen tried to look confused. "I don't know what you're talking about. I know our parents are alive," Nathan said, deciding to be direct. "And I know where you're keeping them." The silence that followed was tense. Stephen exchanged looks with Richard, clearly trying to decide how to proceed. "Sit down," Stephen said finally, indicating an empty chair at the table. Nathan sat down, but maintained a posture that would allow him to stand up and run quickly if necessary. "Suppose I know what you're talking about," Stephen said carefully. "What do you want?" "I want my parents back," Nathan answered, "and I'm willing to make a trade." "What kind of trade?" Richard asked. All the documents proving the frauds in exchange for my parents' freedom, Nathan explained. Simple as that. Stephen laughed sarcastically. You really think it's that easy? He asked. Even if I knew where your parents are, why would I trust you to hold up your end of the deal? Because I don't want money or property, Nathan replied. I just want my family back together. After that, we can disappear and never bother you again. And how do I know you actually have these documents? Richard questioned. Nathan took an envelope from his pocket and placed it on the table. Inside were copies of some of the most incriminating evidence. This is just a small sample, he said. We have much more. Stephen picked up the envelope and quickly examined the documents. His expression grew increasingly worried as he read. Where did you get this? He asked, his voice betraying nervousness. That doesn't matter, Nathan answered. What matters is that I have it. And if anything happens to me or my sister, these documents will automatically be delivered to the authorities. You're bluffing, Stephen said, but he didn't sound convinced. Want to bet your freedom and future on that? Nathan retorted. Richard leaned forward. Even if we accepted this exchange, how would we ensure you don't have copies of these documents? He asked. You can't, Nathan admitted. You'll have to trust my word that I only want my family back. Your word? Stephen laughed. Why would I trust the word of a kid? Because I'm David Mitchell's son, Nathan said, looking Stephen directly in the eyes. And even though you betrayed your own brother, I still have enough honor to keep my word. Stephen was visibly shaken by the mention of his brother. David was always the perfect son, he murmured. Our parents' favorite, the smartest, the bravest. And yet you betrayed him, Nathan said without emotion. I did what was necessary to survive, Stephen exploded, but quickly lowered his voice when he realized he was drawing attention. David never understood what it was like to live in someone's shadow your whole life. So now is your chance to do the right thing, Nathan said. Free him and allow our family to be reunited. Richard and Stephen whispered to each other for a few minutes, clearly debating the options. Even if we considered your proposal, Richard finally said, how would the exchange work? We're not just going to show up somewhere with your parents without guarantees. I suggest a neutral location, Nathan replied. A public place where both sides feel safe. What place? Stephen asked. The town church, Nathan suggested. Sunday morning during the service, there are lots of people, but it's a respectful environment where no one will want to cause trouble. And you would bring all the original documents? Richard insisted. Yes, Nathan lied again. All the originals in exchange for my parents, free and unharmed. Stephen was thoughtful for several minutes. I need time to consider, he finally said. You have until Saturday night to decide, Nathan replied, standing up. If I don't get an answer by then, we'll hand everything over to the authorities on Monday morning. And how will we get in touch? Stephen asked. I'll come back here Saturday night, Nathan answered. 8 o'clock, same table. Nathan left the bar trying to stay calm, though he was trembling inside. When he reached where Dorothy and Emma were waiting in the car, he could hardly believe he had actually confronted Stephen. How did it go? Emma asked anxiously. They're considering it, Nathan replied, still processing what had happened. But I saw on Stephen's face that he's worried about the documents. What about our parents? Dorothy asked. He didn't deny that he has them, Nathan observed. In fact, he almost admitted it. That's a good sign, Emma said. It means we're at least on the right track. They returned home in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. The next step would be even more dangerous, and everyone knew it. On Friday, they spent the day preparing for all possibilities. Dorothy contacted Dr. Robert Thompson by phone and informed him of the situation, asking him to be prepared to act if something went wrong. If I don't hear from you by Monday afternoon, he said, I'll assume something has happened and will immediately begin legal action based on the copies of the documents you're mailing. It was a safety plan, but everyone hoped they wouldn't have to use it. On Saturday night, Nathan returned to the bar, this time accompanied by Emma. They thought showing up together would demonstrate more confidence in the situation. Stephen was there at the same table, but this time alone. Where are your friends? Nathan asked, sitting down. In a safe place, Stephen answered. Just as I hope your documents are. Have you decided to accept our proposal? Emma asked, speaking for the first time. Stephen studied her for a moment, clearly surprised to see her there. You look a lot like your mother when she was young, he said, almost nostalgically. I want to see her again, Emma replied simply. I accept the exchange, Stephen said finally. But with conditions. What conditions? Nathan asked. First, the exchange happens at a location of my choosing, not at the church, Stephen said. Second, you come alone, without that meddling old woman. What location? Emma asked. The old train station outside of town, Stephen answered. It's been abandoned for years, so there won't be any third-party interference. Nathan and Emma exchanged glances. It was a riskier location than they had planned, but perhaps it was their only chance. And how do we know you'll hold up your end? Nathan asked. Because I have no choice, Stephen admitted. If those documents become public, I'll lose everything. And Richard, well, Richard isn't the kind of person who likes to lose money. Sunday morning then? Emma asked. Sunday, 10 o'clock, Stephen confirmed. And remember, just the two of you, and all the original documents. And will our parents be there? Nathan insisted. They will, Stephen promised. But if you try anything clever, the deal is off immediately. We won't try anything, Emma assured. We just want our family back. When they left the bar, the siblings knew they had committed to a very dangerous plan, but they also knew it was probably their only real chance to save their parents. Are you sure you want to do this alone? Dorothy asked when they told her about the meeting. We have no choice, Nathan answered. If we bring you, he might call the whole thing off. Besides, Emma added, if something goes wrong, you can still try to help us from the outside. I'll be hidden near the station, Dorothy promised. If you don't come out of there within 2 hours, I'll get help immediately. And if something happens to us, make sure Dr. Robert gets all the evidence, Nathan requested. Nothing will happen to you, Dorothy said firmly. Stephen may be many terrible things, but he knows he needs you alive to get what he wants. The night from Saturday to Sunday passed slowly. None of the three slept much, each worried about what might happen in the coming hours. When the sun rose, they carefully prepared for the meeting. Nathan and Emma put on simple, comfortable clothes and carried a backpack with the documents they had decided to bring. Remember, Dorothy said as they were leaving, you're smarter than Stephen thinks. If you sense something is wrong, don't hesitate to run. What if our parents are really there? Emma asked. We can't just abandon them. Use your best judgment in the moment, Dorothy advised. But never forget that your parents would rather you stay safe than take unnecessary risks. The old train station was about an hour's walk from town. It was a red brick building that had been majestic decades ago, but was now worn by time and neglect. Rusty tracks stretched in both directions, disappearing into the arid horizon. Nathan and Emma arrived a few minutes before 10 o'clock and positioned themselves where they could see the entire surrounding area. There was no sign of Stephen or anyone else. Do you think he'll show? Emma whispered. He has to, Nathan replied. He needs those documents as much as we need our parents. Exactly at 10 o'clock, they heard the sound of vehicles approaching. 2 pickup trucks appeared on the dusty road, stopping a safe distance from the station. Stephen got out of the first truck, accompanied by 2 armed guards. From the second truck, to the siblings' joy and apprehension, emerged 2 figures they recognized immediately. Their parents. David and Sarah Mitchell looked older and thinner than the last time they had seen them, but they were alive and apparently unhurt. When they saw Nathan and Emma on the station platform, Sarah put a hand over her heart, and David took a step toward them before being held back by one of the guards. "My children," Sarah cried, her voice thick with emotion. "My babies." "It's okay, Mom," Emma shouted back. "We came to get you." Stephen walked to a position between the vehicles and the station, where he could speak to the siblings without shouting. "As you can see," he said, "I've held up my end of the deal. Your parents are here and they're fine." "Now let them go," Nathan demanded. "First, the documents," Stephen countered. "All the originals, as agreed." Nathan hesitated for a moment. This was the moment of truth, and once he handed over the documents, there would be no turning back. "How do we know you'll free them after we hand over the papers?" he asked. "You don't," Stephen admitted. "Just as I don't know if you've really brought all the documents. We're going to have to trust each other." Nathan looked at Emma, who nodded almost imperceptibly. They had decided that, regardless of the consequences, saving their parents was the priority. "All right," Nathan said, picking up the backpack. "But we want our parents released first." "No," Stephen shook his head. "Documents first. That's how this works." "Then let's do it together," Emma suggested. "We walk toward you with the documents, and you walk toward us with our parents. We meet in the middle." Stephen considered the proposal for a moment. "Acceptable," he said, "but my men keep their weapons trained on you the entire time. Any suspicious move and the deal is off." "Understood," Nathan agreed. Slowly, the siblings began to walk toward Stephen, carrying the backpack with the documents. Simultaneously, Stephen and his guards began to walk toward them, bringing David and Sarah. When they were about 10 meters apart, Nathan could clearly see his parents' faces for the first time in years. Sarah was crying silently, and David seemed to be fighting the urge to run toward his children. "The documents," Stephen held out his hand as they met. Nathan handed over the backpack, and Stephen immediately opened it, checking the contents quickly. "Looks like it's all here," he said, sounding relieved. "Now our parents," Emma demanded. Stephen nodded to the guards, who released David and Sarah. For a moment, it seemed everything was working as planned. But then, when David and Sarah ran toward their children and the families were just meters away from embracing, Stephen made a subtle gesture to his men. "Wait," he said suddenly. Everyone stopped, confused. "There's a problem," Stephen continued, his voice now carrying a familiar threat. "What problem?" Nathan asked, feeling his heart race. "How can I be sure you didn't make copies of these documents?" Stephen asked. "How can I be sure you won't cause trouble for me in the future?" "We gave you our word," Emma said. "We told you we only want our family back together." "Words are easy," Stephen shot back, "but a reunited family can change its mind. It might decide it wants justice or revenge or its inheritance back." David stepped forward, visibly angry. "Stephen, you got what you wanted," he said. "Now leave our children alone." "I can't do that, brother," Stephen replied, and there was something almost sad in his voice. "I can't risk you destroying everything I've built." "What are you saying?" Sarah asked, with growing fear in her voice. "I'm saying the only way to guarantee my safety is to ensure you can never testify against me," Stephen explained calmly. Nathan and Emma exchanged glances, realizing in horror that Stephen had never intended to free them. He wanted the documents and also wanted to eliminate the only witnesses who could expose him. "You deceived us," David said, furious. "And you were naive enough to believe me," Stephen retorted, "just as you were naive enough to try to stand up to me years ago." It was then that something unexpected happened. The sound of sirens echoed in the distance, growing louder and louder. Stephen looked around, confused and alarmed. "What is that?" he asked his guards. "I don't know, boss," one of them answered. "We didn't call anyone." The sirens grew louder, and soon they could see several police cars approaching quickly down the road. "You betrayed us," Stephen shouted at Nathan and Emma. "We did nothing," Nathan replied, also confused. "Then who?" Stephen began to ask, but was interrupted when an amplified voice echoed through a loudspeaker. "This is the Federal Police. You are surrounded. Drop your weapons and surrender immediately." Stephen looked around in panic, quickly calculating his options. The police cars had positioned themselves to block all escape routes. "This is impossible," he murmured. "No one knew about this meeting." It was then that a familiar figure appeared from behind one of the police cars. Dr. Robert Thompson, the public prosecutor who had investigated Stephen years before. "Dorothy," Nathan whispered, understanding. She must have contacted Dr. Robert and told him about the meeting. Dr. Robert walked toward the group, accompanied by several federal police officers. "Stephen Mitchell," he said loudly, "you are under arrest for document forgery, fraud, kidnapping, and extortion." "You can't prove anything," Stephen replied, but his voice no longer sounded confident. "Actually, I can, Doctor." Robert smiled, holding an envelope. I have copies of all the documents that prove your crimes, documents provided by Mrs. Dorothy Mitchell and these brave young people. Stephen looked at Nathan and Emma with anger and understanding. You made copies, he said. You lied to me. We learn from the best, Emma replied, without emotion. Richard Anderson is also being arrested at his property at this moment, Dr. Robert continued. Your criminal partnership is over. Stephen realized there was no escape. His guards had already dropped their weapons and raised their hands. The police operation had been planned perfectly. David and Sarah Mitchell, Dr. Robert turned to the parents of the siblings. You are free. I am deeply sorry for what you have been through. Finally, after years of forced separation, the Mitchell family could embrace. Sarah clung to Nathan and Emma as if she would never let them go, while David fought back tears of relief and gratitude. How you've grown, Sarah whispered, running her hands over her children's faces. I missed you so much. We missed you too, Mom, Emma cried. Every day. David hugged Nathan tightly. You've become a brave man, he said. I'm so proud of you. Dad? Nathan finally managed to speak through his tears. We thought you were dead. We almost were, many times, David admitted, but the hope of seeing you again kept us alive. As Stephen was placed in a police car, he looked one last time at his family. David, he called. David turned, still holding his children. What do you want, Stephen? He asked. Stephen hesitated, as if wrestling with a deep emotion. I'm sorry. For what? David asked. For betraying me, for kidnapping my family, for stealing our inheritance. For everything, Stephen said, his voice almost inaudible, for letting jealousy and greed destroy our family. David looked at his brother for a long moment. I forgive you, Stephen, he finally said. But you will have to live with the consequences of your choices. Dr. Robert approached the reunited family. We will need statements from all of you, he said, but that can wait a few days. I know you have a lot to talk about and sort out. What about the inheritance? Nathan asked. Does our family get the land back? With the documents we have, there will be no difficulty proving you are the rightful heirs, Dr. Robert assured. All of Stephen's fraud will be legally reversed. And the mining companies? Sarah asked. All contracts signed by Stephen were illegal, so they will be cancelled, Dr. Robert explained. You will have full control over whether or not to exploit the gemstones found on your land. When they finally arrived back at the house in the desert, Dorothy was waiting for them with tears of joy in her eyes. She had prepared a special meal to celebrate the family reunion. I don't know how to thank you for all you've done for us, Sarah said, hugging Dorothy. You don't need to thank me for anything, Dorothy replied. You are my family. It was my duty to protect you. And now? Emma asked. What are we going to do? David and Sarah looked at each other, clearly thinking about the future. First, said David, we will spend time together, getting to know each other again. We lost many years we can't get back. And then, Sarah added, we will decide how to use our inheritance in a way that honors the memory of our parents and grandparents. Maybe we can use some of the money to help other families who have been through situations like ours, Nathan suggested. And maybe we can turn this property into a place where families can reunite and heal, Emma added. Dorothy smiled, seeing in the new generation of the Mitchell family the same kindness and wisdom she had always admired in their parents. Your grandparents would be so proud, she said. When night fell, the family sat outside the house looking at the bright stars in the clear desert sky. It was the first time in years they were all together, safe and at peace. You know, David said, there's something poetic about the fact that you found refuge right here in this house when you were on the run. As if the family was calling you back home, Sarah agreed. Maybe that's exactly what it was, Nathan said. Maybe everything we went through was necessary to teach us the real value of family. And to teach us that not all treasures are made of precious stones, Emma added. Some treasures are made of love, loyalty, and courage, Dorothy completed. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. In the days that followed, the family began the long process of rebuilding. David and Sarah needed time to readjust to the outside world after years of captivity, and Nathan and Emma needed to readjust to the idea of having parents again. But little by little, they began to function as a true family. David taught Nathan about the history of the family lands and about the dreams he and Sarah had had before being forced to flee. Sarah taught Emma about family traditions that had been nearly lost and about the strength that comes from never giving up hope. Dr. Robert Thompson visited several times to update them on the legal progress of the case. Stephen had confessed all his crimes in exchange for a lighter sentence, and Richard Anderson was facing charges that could result in decades in prison. "There's something more you need to know," Dr. Thompson said during one of his visits. "The investigations revealed that Stephen wasn't working alone, only with Richard." "What do you mean?" David asked. "There was a third partner, someone who provided logistical and legal support for the operation," Dr. Thompson explained. "A corrupt lawyer who helped falsify documents and keep you legally hidden." "Has he been arrested too?" Sarah asked. "We're still tracking him down," Dr. Thompson admitted, "but with Stephen's testimony, it's only a matter of time before we find everyone involved." "And what about the money Stephen received illegally from the mining companies?" Nathan asked. "It will be recovered and returned to you," Dr. Thompson answered. "We estimate it's a substantial amount, in addition to the value of the lands themselves and the precious stone deposits." "That's a lot of money," Emma observed, seeming a little daunted by the responsibility. "Money can be a blessing or a curse," Dorothy said wisely. "It depends on how you choose to use it." David agreed. "Our parents always said true wealth comes from the ability to do good for others," he said. "Perhaps it's time to put that philosophy into practice." In the following weeks, they began to develop plans to use their inheritance constructively. Nathan suggested creating a support center for orphaned children based on his own experiences in the system. Emma wanted to establish an educational program for youth from underprivileged rural communities. Sarah proposed using part of the land for sustainable agriculture, creating jobs for the region. David wanted to preserve a large portion of the property as a nature reserve, protecting the unique desert ecosystem. "And what about the precious stones?" Dorothy asked. "We can mine a small part of the deposits," Sarah suggested, "just enough to fund all the other projects. The rest can remain untouched for future generations." "As our grandparents always wanted," David smiled. One day, while walking the property and discussing plans for the future, they received an unexpected visit. Dr. Thompson arrived accompanied by a woman they had never seen before. "This is Dr. Jennifer Roberts," Dr. Thompson introduced. "She's a family psychology specialist and wanted to meet you." Dr. Roberts was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a warm smile. "I heard about your story through Dr. Thompson," she said, "and I was impressed by the courage and resilience you've shown." "Thank you," Sarah replied, "but we're still readjusting to each other." "That's completely normal," Dr. Roberts assured them. "Families who have experienced trauma like yours often need professional help to rebuild." "We're willing to accept any help," David said. "We want to ensure our family is strong and healthy from here on out." Dr. Jennifer Roberts began visiting them regularly, helping each family member process their experiences and develop healthy strategies to cope with the trauma. She also helped them plan how to publicly reveal their story without compromising their privacy and security. During one of these sessions, Emma asked a question that had been bothering her for weeks. "Why did Stephen choose to be so cruel?" she asked. "He could have split the inheritance with Dad and still been very wealthy." "Sometimes people make choices based on very deep emotions that they themselves don't fully understand," Dr. Jennifer explained. "Stephen may have been motivated by jealousy, fear of inadequacy, or even by traumas from his own childhood." "That doesn't justify what he did," Nathan said firmly. "Absolutely not," Dr. Jennifer agreed. "Understanding someone's motivations doesn't mean forgiving harmful behavior, but it can help us ensure we don't develop the same destructive patterns." "Do you think Stephen can be rehabilitated?" Sarah asked. "It's possible," Dr. Jennifer replied, "but that would depend on him genuinely wanting to change, and it would be a very long and difficult process." As the family healed and grew stronger, They also began receiving media attention. The story of their reunion after years of forced separation captured the public's imagination, and several journalistic organizations requested interviews. "I don't know if I'm ready to speak publicly about all of this," David admitted during a family meeting. "But our story could help other families going through similar situations," Emma argued. "And it could raise awareness about corruption and abuse of power," Nathan added. "Perhaps we can find a middle ground," Sarah suggested. "Tell our story, but in a way that protects our privacy and allows us to control the narrative." They decided to work with only one trusted journalist to tell their story fully and accurately. The resulting article was published in a respected national magazine and generated a very positive public response. More importantly, their story inspired several other families to come out of the shadows and seek justice for similar abuses. Dr. Robert Thompson found himself inundated with cases of people who had been victims of fraudulent inheritance schemes. "You've started something bigger than you imagined," he said during a visit. "Your courage is helping expose a network of corruption that goes far beyond Stephen's case." "That's good," Sarah said. "If our suffering can help prevent other families from going through the same thing, then it was worth it." 6 months after their reunion, the Mitchell family was stronger than ever. They had learned to communicate openly about their feelings and experiences and developed an intimacy based on mutual respect and understanding. The support center for orphaned children that Nathan had proposed was under construction, with plans to open next year. Emma's educational program was already operating on a small scale, offering scholarships to young people in the region. Sarah's sustainable farm was producing organic food that was sold in neighboring towns, providing employment for dozens of local families. David's nature reserve was officially protected by law and had become a model for arid ecosystem conservation. On a particularly quiet afternoon, the family gathered at the same spot where Nathan and Emma had found the documents hidden by their parents. Now there was a stone bench there, and they often sat there to talk and reflect. "You know what impresses me most about this whole experience?" Dorothy said, joining them. "What?" Emma asked. "How you turned something terrible into something beautiful," she replied. "Instead of becoming bitter or vengeful, you chose to use your experience to help others. We learned that holding on to anger and resentment only hurts ourselves," David explained. "Forgiving Stephen wasn't easy, but it was necessary for our own healing. And deciding to use our wealth to help others felt natural," Sarah added, "because we experienced firsthand what it's like to lose everything and need the kindness of strangers." "You two," David addressed Nathan and Emma, "have shown a maturity and courage that many adults never develop. I am immensely proud of you." "We just did what anyone would do for their family," Nathan replied. "Actually, no," Dr. Jennifer said, approaching the group for one of the regular sessions. "Many people faced with similar circumstances despair or give up. You chose to fight, and you chose to fight in a smart and brave way." "And now?" Emma asked. "What's the next step for our family?" "To keep growing together," Sarah answered. "To keep learning from each other and building something positive for the future. And to never forget the lessons we've learned," David added, "about the value of family, honesty, and perseverance." As the sun set over the desert, painting the sky with golden and orange hues, the Mitchell family stood up and walked back home hand in hand. The small wooden house that had served as a refuge during a sandstorm was now truly a home, filled with love, laughter, and hope for the future. That night, as they prepared for bed, Nathan looked out the window at the bright stars in the clear desert sky. "Emma," he called softly. "What?" she answered from the next room. "Do you regret anything?" he asked. "About what?" she asked. "About everything we went through, the decisions we made, the risks we took." Emma thought for a moment before answering. "No," she said finally, "because it all brought us to where we are now. And now we have our family back, we have a purpose, and we have a chance to make a difference in other people's lives." "That's exactly what I was thinking." Nathan smiled in the dark. "Nathan," Emma called after a few minutes of silence. "Yes? Do you think our children will ever have to face challenges like the ones we faced?" "I hope not," Nathan replied. "But if they do, at least they'll know they come from a family that never gives up, that always fights for what's right, and that always protects each other." "And they'll know that true love can overcome any obstacle," Emma added. In the next room, David and Sarah listened to their children's conversation with tears of pride in their eyes. "They've become amazing people," Sarah whispered to her husband. "Better than we could have imagined," David agreed. "They took the best of our family and made it grow even more." "And they'll pass these values on to their own families one day," Sarah said. "The real legacy of the Mitchell family," David observed, "isn't the land or the precious stones. It's the strength of unconditional love and the courage to always do what's right." In the kitchen, Dorothy finished putting away the dinner dishes and smiled as she heard the sounds of a happy family preparing for bed. After so many years of silence and loneliness, the house was full of life and love again. "Thank you," she whispered to a photograph of her deceased siblings that she kept in the kitchen. "Thank you for letting me see this family reunited again." And so, in the small house in the middle of the desert that had offered shelter during a sandstorm, the Mitchell family slept in peace for the first time in many years. They had faced betrayal, separation, fear, and doubt, but through courage, love, and determination, they found their way back to each other. The storm had passed, and what remained was a clear, starry sky full of infinite possibilities for the future. End of story. What did you think of this story of overcoming adversity and family reunion? Did Nathan and Emma make the right decisions by risking everything to save their parents? Would you do the same in their place? Tell us in the comments what moved you most on this journey, and if you know any family that has gone through similar challenges. Your opinion is very important to us. Don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other emotional stories like this one.